Welcome. This is the homework solution for week 6. This is going to go over Wednesday, September 11th, the homework solution. Here it says to just solve the equation, then check your solution. For the purpose of this, I'm only just going to be solving the equation. Okay? Notice 1 through 8 on your homework shows all of the solving the equations with a parentheses in there. So, first step, we have a 4 parentheses x plus 5, close the parentheses, is equal to 23. First step is always to rewrite the equation. That's what I did here. And I draw a line straight down to separate my left to my right. Okay, next, we want to get rid of the parentheses first. So you're going to distribute the 4. Why do we distribute the 4? Because that is the value that is in front of the parentheses. Notice it becomes 4 times x plus 4 times 5. The 4 is distributed to both terms in the parentheses. What do I have left over? 4 times x is 4x. 4 times 5 is 20. That is what I have left over on my left-hand side. My right-hand side was just a 32. Next, this should remind you of a problem from Tuesday. It's a two-step equation. So here, what do? Do I divide by 4 or subtract 20? You deal with the outward thing here. So you're going to deal with the plus 20. What is the opposite or inverse of plus 20? It is to subtract 20. Do that to both sides. Once you subtract 20 from both sides, you should see the plus 20 and the minus 20 cancels out. What do I have left over on the left-hand side? It's just a 4x. On my right-hand side, 32 subtract 20 is just a 12. Right now, you have 4x is equals to 12. So, what do you do to get x alone? Right now, it is multiply by 4. So, what is the opposite or inverse of multiply by 4? It is to divide by 4. Okay, the 4 divided by 4 on the left-hand side cancels out. It makes the number 1. So, what do I have left over on my left-hand side? It's just an x. On my right-hand side, if you plug into a calculator, 12 divided by 4 just becomes 3. There you go. That is all your solution. Notice the two reds on the bottom is just your two-step equation that you did on Tuesday. And the distributive step is what you learn on Wednesday. Okay? Make sure you do the parentheses first. Number 2, 5 parentheses x minus 2, close the parentheses, is equal to negative 40. First step is always to rewrite the equation, then draw a line straight down to separate the left from the right. We have to deal with the parentheses. How do we deal with the parentheses? We distribute by the term in front. The term in front of the parentheses right now is that 5. So 5 is going to multiply to x, and 5 is going to multiply to the negative 2. And that is all going to be equal to negative 40. On my left-hand side, 5 times x is just 5x. 5 times negative 2 is negative 10. My right-hand side of negative 40 is unchanged. This should look like a Tuesday's problem now. What do you do next? You have a multiply by 5 and a minus 10. You deal with the most outward thing first. So you're going to deal with that minus 10. What is the opposite or inverse of minus 10? It is to add 10. Why do we add 10? Because watch, the negative 10 and the plus 10 here cancels out. On my left hand side, what do I have left over now? Just a 5x. On my right hand side, negative 40 plus 10 becomes negative 30. 5 times x is equal to negative 30. So how do I get x alone? Right now, it is attached via multiplication. So the opposite or inverse of multiply is divide. So on my left-hand side, I'm going to divide by 5. Why do I divide by 5? It is because it cancels out. 5 over 5 just becomes the number 1. That is why x is now alone. On my right-hand side, negative 30 divide by 5, because again, I have to divide by 5 to both sides. Negative 30 divided by 5 becomes negative 6. So that is your complete answer. Again, this follows the same step as number 1. You distribute, then you get rid of the outwardmost thing, then you get rid of the number that is in front of the x. Number 3, negative 4 parentheses x plus 5 close the parentheses is equal to 12. First step is to copy the equation or rewrite the equation. Draw a line straight down to separate the left from the right. What you have here is a parentheses that you have to deal with. You have to get rid of. How do you deal with the parentheses? You multiply by the term in front. What is the term in front of the parentheses? The negative 4. So that negative 4 is going to be multiplied to x, and that negative 4 is going to be multiplied to 5. That is what I distribute. Negative 4 times x is negative 4x. Negative 4 times 5 is negative 20. The right-hand side of 12 remains unchanged. This should remind you of a Tuesday's problem. You have negative 4x minus 20 is equal to 12. You want to deal with the most outward thing, which is your minus 20. What is the opposite or inverse of minus 20? It is add 20. Make sure you add 20 to both sides. Why do you add 20 to both sides? Because the negative 20 and the add 20 cancels out. What do I have left over on the left-hand side? A negative 4x. On my right-hand side, the 12 plus 20 becomes 32. What is attached to the x right now? It is a multiply by negative 4. Okay? A multiply by negative 4 is what is still next to the x. So you do the opposite or the inverse, which is to divide by negative 4. Notice I divide by the whole thing. I don't just divide by 4. I divide by negative 4. Okay, I divide by negative 4 because that is what was attached to the x. The negative 4 divide by the negative 4 cancels out. On my left-hand side, I get an x. On my right-hand side, I get a negative 8. 32 divided by negative 4 becomes negative 8. I know it's solved for because x is now alone. Number 4, negative 5 parentheses x minus 2 close the parentheses is equal to negative 40. First step is always to rewrite the equation and draw a line straight down. We notice that there is a negative 5 in front of the parentheses. Okay, what do we need to do to get rid of the parentheses? It is to multiply by the outward term. The outward term that is next to the parentheses is your negative 5. So the negative 5 is going to be multiplied to the x, and the negative 5 is going to be multiplied to the negative 2. That is what happens on the left-hand side when I distribute the negative 5 inside the parentheses. My right-hand side of negative 40 remains unchanged. On my left-hand side, negative 5x plus negative 5 times negative 2 should be a positive 10. Be very careful with your multiplication on the left-hand side. The left-hand side should be negative 5x plus 10 equals to negative 40. Nothing happened to that negative 40. That is still on your right-hand side. Right now, you have a negative 5 times x plus 10. What do you do first? You have to get rid of the outwardmost thing, which is that plus 10. What is the opposite of plus 10? It is to subtract 10. Please do that to both sides. Once you subtract 10 to both sides, you notice on the left-hand side that plus 10 and that minus 10 cancels out. What do I have left over on the left-hand side? It's just a negative 5x. My right-hand side, that negative 40 minus 10 becomes negative 50. If you get a different answer or you think it's negative 30, plug it into your calculator. You're going to see why you're wrong. Right now, what is attached to the x is a negative 5 times x. What is the inverse or opposite of negative 5 multiply? Which is to divide by negative 5. Make sure you divide by the complete term. Right here, the complete term that is in front of the x is a negative 5, or multiply by negative 5. So I'm going to divide by negative 5 to both sides. Why do I do that? Do you see the negative 5 divided by negative 5 cancels out? Okay, what do I have left over on the left-hand side? It's just an x. My right-hand side, negative 50 divided by negative 5 just becomes a 10. Plug it into your calculator to save you time. Negative 50 divided by negative 5 becomes a 10. That's what happens in your calculator. Number 5, 2 parentheses 4x plus 6, close the parentheses, is equal to 20. So we have to deal with the parentheses, but first we always rewrite down our equation and draw a line straight down to separate the left from the right. What do we do to get rid of the parentheses? We have to distribute by the term that is in front of the parentheses. In this case, it is the 2. So the 2 is going to be multiplied to the 4x because that is the first term, and 2 is going to be multiplied to the 6, which is the second term in the parentheses. The right-hand side of 20 remains unchanged. 2 times 4x becomes 8x, and 2 times 6 becomes 12. That all equals to 20 because the right-hand side goes unchanged. This should remind you of a Tuesday's problem, which is a two-step equation. Here, the x still has to multiply by 8 and the plus 12. So you're going to subtract 12 first because, again, you're dealing with the most outward thing. The plus 12 and the minus 12 cancels out on the left-hand side. That is the reason why you subtract or you do the inverse. On the left-hand side, once it cancels, I have just an 8x on the left, and my right-hand side, the 20 minus 12 becomes 8. I have a multiply by 8 on the left-hand side, which is next to the x. So I'm going to divide by 8 to both sides. Why do I divide 8 to both sides? Notice the 8 over 8 cancels or simplifies to the number 1. So I just have left over just an x. On my right-hand side, 8 divided by 8 becomes just a 1. 6. And 2 parentheses 4x minus 6 is equal to 20. People think this is the same problem. No, it's different. Do you see this one is plus 6? This one is going to be a minus 6. So be very careful. Okay? So first step is always to write down the equation and draw a line straight down. We have to get rid of the parentheses. So what do? We distribute by using by the term that is in front. The term that is in front of the parentheses is a 2. So we are going to distribute by 2. 2 times the first term, which is 4x, plus 2 times negative 6, which is your second term. Okay? On the left-hand side, 2 times 4x becomes 8x, and 2 times negative 6 is negative 12. That is all equal to 20, which is the right-hand side. Now this should remind you of a Tuesday's problem. Right now, you have 8 times x and minus 12. So you want to deal with the minus 12 first. What is the opposite or the inverse of minus 12? It is to add 12. Make sure you do that to both sides. The plus 12 gets you to cancel this. That is the reason why you add 12. So the negative 12 plus the 12 cancels out. So what you have left over on the left-hand side is just your 8x. On your right-hand side, your 20 plus 12 becomes 32. Right now, the x is going to multiply to the 8. So what is the opposite of multiplying by 8? It is to divide by 8. Once you divide by 8, what cancels out? 8 divided by 8, that just becomes 1 because a number divided by itself is just a whole, right? 8 over 8 is just 1. So what you have left over on the left-hand side is just an x. On my right-hand side, 32 divided by 8 just becomes 4. Okay, if you look at your homework, I wrote 5 and 6 again, but again, that's just an error. That is actually just number 7. Okay, this is different. Now, do you see it's actually a negative 2 that is in front? So number 7, it's negative 2 parentheses 4x plus 6, close the parentheses, is equal to 20. First step is always to rewrite the equation and draw a line straight down. We have to get rid of the parentheses by distributing the out term here. So the term that is out in front is your negative 2. So that is what you're going to distribute by. Your negative 2 is going to be multiplied to 4x, and the negative 2 is going to be multiplied to the 6. Negative 2 times 4x is negative 8. Negative 2 times 6 is negative 12. Bring the equal sign down. The right-hand side is 20. That is unchanged. How do you get rid? So here you have a negative 8 times x and a minus 12. You want to deal with the outwardmost thing. The outwardmost thing here is a minus 12. What is the opposite or inverse of minus 12? It is to add 12. Make sure you add 12 to both sides. Why do you add 12 to both sides? Because this is going to cancel. What do I have left over on the left-hand side? A negative 8x. On my right-hand side, a 20 plus 12 just becomes 32. Right now, x is multiplied by negative 8. So what is the opposite of multiply by negative 8? Is to divide by negative 8. Why do I divide by -8? Look at the left-hand side. Do you see how this cancels? That is why. What do I have left over on the left-hand side? Which is just an x. My right-hand side, 32 divided by -8 just becomes -4. Number 8. Again, this is different. Okay, this one, it's -2. On the inside, it's 4x plus 6. The outside is the same here as -2, but the inside is 4x minus 6. Again, be very careful. They're different problems. Okay, first step is always to rewrite the equation. It is -2 parentheses 4x minus 6 close the parentheses is equal to 20. Draw a line straight down to separate your left from your right. We have to get rid of the parentheses by multiply by the front term. The front term here is -2. So we are going to distribute that -2 into the terms inside the parentheses. The -2 is going to be multiplied to the 4x plus -2 is going to be multiplied to the -6, and that is all equal to 20. -2 times 4x is -8x. -2 times -6 is a positive 12, equals to 20. Okay, this reminds you of a Tuesday's problem. You want to deal with the outwardmost thing. The outwardmost thing here is that plus 12. What is the opposite of plus 12, or what is the inverse of plus 12? It is to subtract 12. Notice the plus 12 and the minus 12 cancel each other out. It makes the number 0. On the left-hand side, what is left over? Just your -8x. On my right-hand side, the 20 plus -12 becomes 8. Okay, be very careful. 20 subtract 12 is 8, not -8, just 8. Use a calculator. So right now I have -8 times x is equal to 8. How do I get x alone? I'm going to divide. Why? Because right now the x is attached via multiplication. -8 divided by -8. Do you see how that cancels out? On my left-hand side, what are you left with? Just an x. On my right-hand side, 8 divided by -8 just becomes -1. There you go. Those are all your solutions for Wednesday, September 11th.